I very much believe that the significant portion of this phenomenon is from non-human intelligence. And the reason I believe that is I look at the earliest history of this, particularly like post-World War II, but even there are some very, I would say, good, not perfect, but good accounts from prior to World War II that are worth looking at as well. And so when you look at some of these early cases, and then particularly when you read the declassified documents that I mentioned earlier that are available, it's hard for me to square that with a secret U.S. black budget project. It just doesn't, because all the intelligence officers that we know of at the time in the 40s were looking into this, and there's nothing that I have seen that really even you mentioned Joseph Farrell's work.
Yeah.
Were we on camera when we talked about Joe? I can't.
Where were we, Steve? I don't remember. Well, anyways, we were talking about Joseph Farrell before this thing started.
And I'm a friend of Joe's, and I respect and admire his work a lot. But I don't even think that he has made a clear-cut case that it's definitely all like, Third Reich tech and all of that. I mean,
there's definitely the Horton brothers, which was
yeah. There's the Horton brothers, and I think now we're seeing more and more support for the idea of a 1933 Italian recovery. Right. Italian.
Mm-hmm. This is, I think, Grush talked about this, right?
Grush talked about it. Malmgren in his interview with Jesse Michaels, and Eric Davis in his congressional briefing talked about it. So we're seeing all these different perspectives coming in on this. The real man who researched this is an Italian researcher named Roberto Pinotti, who looked at a lot of the original documents that do exist in Italian from 1933. And
interesting.
So I think, yes, like this goes back farther in time than a lot of the American researchers, like, because we're so American-centered. It's like Roswell, it all starts there.
Yeah.
No, I think there's, even in the U.S., there were prior cases to Roswell, but certainly this 1933 case.
So you think the fact that these cases or crash recoveries, retrievals, whatever you want to call them, they go back so far earlier than the 1940s, you think that points to it being of non-human origin just because of how advanced it was and how early it was?
Yeah, I think so. That's what I believe in.
And where do you think they would have come from? I know we're being super speculative here. I'm just saying, like, if
I would say another planet.
Another planet. Right.
Or there's a couple of different ways to look at this. So, Hal Puthoff wrote a very interesting paper a number of years ago on ultra-terrestrials, this concept. And it's a very interesting paper. I highly recommend people read it. And I think his take, and he just mentioned this the other day in his interview, but maybe there's been a group that's been here a long time that originally comes from elsewhere. They've set up shop in some manner, which I think is a totally possible. I would imagine that the extraterrestrial hypothesis actually still makes more sense to me than anything else. I mean, we can get attracted to interdimensional theories, but does anyone actually even understand what another dimension would be? Like, how does that work? How do they materialize in our? Maybe it's possible, but I don't really understand how that's possible. I can understand how it could be possible, even despite the vast distances, to go interstellar if you can manipulate space-time in some way, bending space-time. We have math for that. A guy named Miguel Alcubierre in the 90s apparently came up with some version of warp drive mathematically. The problem is finding the amount of energy sufficient to do it. But
I think that's the same thing with time travel, right?
I think so, yeah. So
I love Michael Masters' time travel theory.
I don't know if I'm on top of that one, so maybe you can educate me. Yeah. But I guess I'll just say I think the fact that they come from another place still makes the most sense to me. The fact that we would be of interest makes a lot of sense to me. The fact that Earth would be a very interesting place also makes a lot of sense to me. I think all of that makes perfect sense. That if you have the ability, if you've achieved a technological capability to detect advanced life elsewhere, which I don't see that as impossible at all, I mean, we're already looking at exoplanetary systems and looking for life signatures, and we just started with this business. So if you've been doing this for 1,000 years or more, maybe you can detect consciousness. So, you can go, we talked about remote viewing.
Yeah.
Could they actually have the ability to detect advanced consciousness? I don't know. Maybe they can. Or maybe there are other technologies that we just haven't can envision. Mm-hmm. So they could find us, and then could they get to us? Yeah, probably. I don't see why not. At least in theory, I think it could be entirely possible. And we would be interesting because, A, there could be a lot of life in this universe, but how common, really, would planets like ours be? We're in the Goldilocks zone, but it takes a lot more than that.
Right.
We have
the moon.
We have the moon,
incredible,
which is what's the word?
It's the perfect terraforming device. It's I think it's 1/20th the size of the sun and 1/20th the distance from the sun. I think I'm getting that math right.
It's a lot less than 1/20th the size.
Maybe I'm getting that math wrong, Steve. Maybe you can correct me with the fractions there. Anyways, the fractions are exact. The exact size comparison to the sun and the exact distance from the sun is equal. So it creates that perfect eclipse.
Yeah.
And so that makes
that's an amazing thing. If that's a significant part, the fact that it's a stabilizer of our environment is very significant. It's always got one side turned to the Earth. I can't remember the word for that, but that could be significant.
Tidally locked.
Yeah, thank you.
Steve, what's the fractions of the distance ratio and the size ratio? Find that, and then it is the perfect terraforming device for us.
And it's sun size and distance ratio. There you go. You could figure that out. I'll let you
let us know,
Steve.
That's your homework assignment.
But we also have water and land. So but we're not completely covered in water either. So we have enough water for life to evolve in the water, but then we have enough land out of the water that life can crawl up and evolve on land. That's kind of an interesting thing right there. And we've had enough stability over hundreds of millions of years that we can allow complex life to develop on land. And that can't be very common. Now, the universe is big enough that you could think, all right, maybe 1 out of 1 million systems might have something like this, or whatever it is, and that could still be enough to develop advanced life. And which I think I've come to believe. I'm not an expert in this at all, but I tend to think that life anywhere is going naturally to want to increase its complexity just because life competes with other life for resources and energy and food, and that intelligence is one necessary evolutionary adaptation that would be useful for any life form, and not just humans. Dinosaurs were intelligent, hell. Not maybe compared to us, but compared to previous life forms, they probably were. Intelligence is always increasing.
Yes.
And, our body plan just allowed us to hit the sweet spot. We developed these hands that can do things and manipulate our environment, and that further increased our intelligence, I believe. So I think life naturally will do that given the proper conditions.
Right.
And I'm going to guess that, in enough parts of the universe, those conditions have existed so that you then develop life. And then it gets to the critical point where it develops its own ability to kind of manage itself, which we're maybe kind of doing. And we're developing strong AI and all the other technologies that'll go along with it, nanotech and who the hell knows what, quantum computing, and what kind of crazy diabolical mixture will come out of all of that. And I think that that's probably what other life forms have done, because I suspect that what intelligent life will do is it is guided by the requirements of constantly developing that intelligence. In other words, it's not about, our society isn't about the human race anymore. It's really about meeting the needs of the demands of a highly integrated, digitally advanced, artificially intelligent system of which we are now just a part. We think it's working for us, but I think we're serving the system. And we're serving the system that is becoming ever more complex. And that intelligence will just kind of take off on its own. because I think it's the intelligence that's the dominant factor, not necessarily our biological contribution to it.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if anyone actually ever thinks that, or if I'm the only person, but this is what I've come to believe. Like, we serve the system that we have helped to create. But really, we are simply actors, or we're
the caterpillar.
Yeah, we're like the servants of what high intelligence demands. And that's what we're doing.